There are foods that define a nation. Foods so deeply woven into the fabric of a culture that you can't imagine the country without them. The hamburger is one of them. Every single day, Americans eat roughly 50 million of them. From backyard barbecues to drive-thrus to Michelin-starred kitchens, the burger is everywhere. It's the great equalizer. The president eats one. The construction worker eats one. The college student at 2 a.m. eats one. But have you ever stopped to wonder, where did it all begin? Not the concept of ground beef that's ancient. Not the name that comes from a city in Germany. I'm talking about the moment someone pressed ground beef into a patty, slapped it between bread, and created the sandwich that would conquer the world. Because that moment, that happened in a small lunch wagon in New Haven, Connecticut, in the year 1900. And the man who did it was a Danish immigrant named Louis Lassen. This is the story of Louis's Lunch, the oldest continuously operating hamburger restaurant in America, the birthplace of the hamburger sandwich, and one of the most stubborn, tradition-bound, gloriously unchanged restaurants on earth. Welcome to the birth of the burger. To understand the birth of the burger, you have to understand the man who made it. And to understand him, you have to go back to a small parish called Ballum in the region of Schleswig, Denmark. On July 30th, 1865, Ludwig Lassen was born into a Danish family in this quiet corner of northern Europe. But Schleswig was not a peaceful place in those days. Just a year before Louis's birth, Denmark had lost a brutal war to Prussia. The region was in turmoil. Opportunities were scarce. So in 1881, at the age of 16, young Ludwig, who would Americanize his name to Louis, boarded a ship and crossed the Atlantic Ocean. He arrived in New Haven, Connecticut, a booming industrial city that was becoming one of America's great manufacturing hubs. New Haven in the 1880s was a city of immigrants. Irish, Italian, German, Scandinavian, they came by the thousands to work in the factories, the shipyards, and the railroads. Yale University was already a century old. The city had energy, it had ambition, and it had hunger. Lots of hungry workers needed to be fed, fast and cheap. Louis Lassen didn't start as a cook. He was a blacksmith by trade. But like so many immigrants, he pivoted. He became a food peddler, selling butter and eggs from a wooden cart that he pushed through the streets of New Haven. It was hard work, up before dawn, out in all weather. But Louis had something that would carry him through: hustle. In 1889, Louis married Sophia Kurtz, an Ohio-born woman, in Manhattan. They would go on to have 5 children, 1 daughter and 4 sons. And it was around this time that Louis began to dream bigger than a butter cart. In 1895, Louis Lassen took the money he'd saved, bought a small lunch wagon, basically a mobile food cart, horse-drawn, and set up shop in New Haven. He sold simple, hearty fare to the working men of the city. Steak sandwiches, quick meals, food you could eat with your hands while standing on a street corner. He was good at it. The food was honest. The portions were generous. And Louis had a gift for making people feel at home, even if home was a wooden cart on a busy street. But here's the thing. In 1895, Louis Lassen was not making hamburgers. Not yet. The hamburger sandwich, as we think of it, didn't really exist. What Louis was serving was steak, sliced, not ground, on bread. It was delicious. It was popular. But it wasn't history-making. That would come 5 years later. In 1900, on an ordinary day that would turn out to be anything but ordinary. The year is 1900. William McKinley is president. The Wright brothers are still 3 years away from Kitty Hawk. The average American worker earns about 22 cents an hour. And in New Haven, Connecticut, a local businessman, in a rush, probably late for a meeting, maybe trying to catch a train, walks up to Louis Lassen's lunch wagon. According to the Lassen family, the man exclaimed, "Louis, I'm in a rush. Slap a meat puck between 2 planks and step on it." Now, that's the family legend. Maybe he said it exactly like that. Maybe he just said, "I'm in a hurry. Give me something I can eat on the run." Either way, the result was the same. Louis Lassen fought fast. He took his own blend of ground steak trimmings, the odds and ends, the pieces that weren't pretty enough to serve as sliced steak, and formed them into a patty. He cooked it on his grill. And then, instead of plating it with a knife and fork, he did something revolutionary. He placed that cooked patty between two slices of toasted bread. And just like that, the hamburger sandwich was born. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That's not a hamburger. That's a patty melt. Where's the bun? And you're not wrong to ask. Because here's where the story gets complicated and fascinating. In 1900, the hamburger bun didn't exist yet. That wouldn't come until 1916, when a fry cook named Walter Anderson in Wichita, Kansas, would invent it. Walter Anderson would go on to co-found White Castle in 1921, the first fast food hamburger chain. But that's a story for another video. What Louis Lassen created in 1900 was a ground beef patty between two slices of toast. No condiments, no lettuce, no pickles, just meat and bread. And in that simplicity was genius. It was portable, it was filling, it was affordable, and it was delicious. The customer took his sandwich and ran, and he must have told his friends, because soon, more and more people were coming to Louis's wagon asking for that sandwich Louis makes with the ground beef. Louis Lassen had accidentally invented one of the most important foods in American history. The hamburger sandwich was an instant hit, but Louis Lassen wasn't trying to build an empire. He was trying to feed his family, and for 17 years, he kept running his lunch wagon, serving up his now famous creation to the hungry masses of New Haven. In 1917, Louis made a big move. He left the wagon behind and moved his operation into a square brick building that had once been a tannery. It was a humble space, small, unassuming, tucked away on a side street. But it was permanent, and permanence matters when you're building a legacy. The restaurant kept growing. Louis's sons joined the business. The menu stayed simple: burgers, potato salad, potato chips, homemade pie. But the star was always the burger, cooked on those same cast-iron vertical gas broilers that Louis had acquired back in 1898. Broilers that are still in use today over 125 years later. Let me say that again because it's worth letting it sink in. The broilers at Louis's Lunch were made in 1898. They were manufactured by the Bridge and Beach Company. They are cast iron. They are vertical. And they cook the burgers using hinged steel wire gridirons that hold the patties in place while flame broiling them on both sides simultaneously. These aren't museum pieces behind glass. They're working equipment. They get fired up every single day. And they produce a burger unlike anything you've ever tasted, seared, smoky, with a crust that you just can't replicate on a flat top or a modern grill. In the 1950s, Ken Lassen, Louis's grandson, added cheese spread to the burger. Not sliced cheese. Cheese spread. Sharp, tangy, melted directly onto the patty on the broiler. It became part of the signature. And the toast? That's made in a 1929 savory appliance Radiant gas toaster. Because of course it is. By the mid-20th century, Louis's Lunch had become a New Haven institution. Politicians ate there. Yale students ate there. Locals who'd been coming since childhood brought their own children, and then their grandchildren. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a time capsule. Now, I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't address the elephant in the room. Because not everyone agrees that Louis Lassen invented the hamburger. In fact, the history of the hamburger is one of the most disputed origin stories in all of American food. And it's not just a friendly disagreement. It's a full-blown culinary Cold War. Let's take a tour of the claimants. First up, Charlie Negreen, also known as Hamburger Charlie, from Seymour, Wisconsin. In 1885, at the age of 15, Charlie was reportedly selling meatballs at the Seymour Fair. But meatballs are awkward to eat while walking around a fairground. So Charlie had a bright idea. He flattened the meatballs and put them between bread. He called it a hamburger, after the Hamburg steak that German immigrants in the area knew well. The Seymour Community Historical Society stands by this claim. And every year, Seymour, Wisconsin, celebrates Hamburger Charlie with a festival. Next, the Mencius brothers, Frank and Charles, from Akron, Ohio. Their story goes that in 1885, they were vendors at the Erie County Fair in Hamburg, New York. They ran out of sausage for their sandwiches. In a panic, they substituted ground beef, named the creation after the fair's location, and the hamburger was born. But here's a twist. Frank Mencius's own obituary in the New York Times said these events took place at the 1892 Summit County Fair in Akron, not the 1885 Hamburg Fair. So even the family's own story has inconsistencies. Then there's Fletcher Davis of Athens, Texas. Texas historian Frank X. Tolbert credits Fletcher with selling hamburgers at his cafe on Tyler Street in the late 1880s, before bringing them to the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The 1904 World's Fair was a massive event that introduced millions of Americans to new foods, and if Fletcher Davis was there with his burgers, that would have been huge exposure. But the Texas claimant with perhaps the strongest evidence is Oscar Weber Bilby of Tulsa, Oklahoma. On July 4, 1891, that's 9 years before Louis Lassen's famous 1900 creation, Oscar Bilby served ground beef on his wife's homemade buns at a 4th of July party on his farm just west of Tulsa. This is significant because Bilby wasn't using toast. He was using a bun. And in 1995, after meticulous research, Oklahoma Governor Frank Keating issued a proclamation declaring Tulsa as the real birthplace of the hamburger. And then, in 2021, a bombshell. A researcher discovered an advertisement in the Shiner Gazette, a Texas newspaper, from 1894. It read, "Hamburger steak sandwiches served every day in the week at Barney's Saloon, Moulton." That's 6 years before Louis Lassen's 1900 creation. And around the same time, the San Francisco Chronicle ran a story about curbside food carts serving hamburger steak sandwiches. Burger scholar George Motz, yes, that's a real job, and he's the best in the business, called the Barney's Saloon discovery an incredible discovery, and said it definitively debunked the Louis's Lunch claim as the first. So why does Louis's Lunch still get called the birthplace of the hamburger? In 2000, the Library of Congress recognized Louis's Lunch as the creator of the hamburger. This wasn't done in a vacuum. It was backed by U.S. Representative Rosa DeLauro, and it gave Louis's Lunch a level of official credibility that few other claimants have. But here's what the Library of Congress actually said. They recognized Louis's Lunch for selling the first hamburger steak sandwich in the U.S. in 1895. Wait, 1895? Not 1900? That's because Louis's Lunch was serving steak sandwiches from the very beginning. The 1900 date is specifically for the ground beef version, the hamburger as we know it. So where does that leave us? Burger expert George Motz puts it best. The claim that Louis's Lunch has is semi-legit. Other claims are equally valid and equally muddy. There really is no solid claim. The truth is, the hamburger was probably invented multiple times in multiple places by multiple people who all had the same brilliant idea. Put ground beef between bread. It was an idea whose time had come. The ingredients were available. The need was there. Industrial workers needed fast, portable, affordable food. And the cultural moment was right. Louis Lassen may not have been the absolute first. But here's what he undeniably was. The founder of the oldest continuously operating hamburger restaurant in the United States. While Barney's Saloon is long gone, while the Minchus Brothers stand is a memory, while Fletcher Davis's cafe is dust, Louis's Lunch is still there, still cooking, still serving burgers on toast, made on 1898 broilers, in a building that was moved brick by people who refused to let it die. And that brings us to one of the most dramatic chapters in this story. By the early 1970s, New Haven was changing. Urban renewal was sweeping through American cities, and New Haven was no exception. Old buildings were being torn down to make way for new development. High-rises, parking garages, modernity, and Louis's Lunch, that humble brick building that had been home since 1917, was in the crosshairs. The city wanted the land. The restaurant was scheduled for demolition. For most small businesses, that would have been the end. A check from the city. A sad closing day. Plaque maybe if they were lucky. But Louis's Lunch wasn't most small businesses. When the regulars found out, something remarkable happened. Scores of devoted patrons, not just from New Haven, but from all over the world, rallied to save the restaurant. They wrote letters. They showed up at city meetings. They made noise. And it worked. Just hours before the demolition deadline, plans were finalized to move the entire building. Not just the equipment, not just the sign, the whole building. In 1975, the historic brick structure was loaded onto a flatbed truck and moved 4 blocks down to 261 Crown Street, where it sits today. The journey took about 30 minutes, but the preparation took months. And here's the part that gives me chills. When the building was reconstructed at its new location, friends and supporters of Lewis's Lunch sent bricks from every corner of the globe to help rebuild its walls. Thousands of bricks, each one with its own story. From Europe, from Asia, from every state in America. The walls of Lewis's Lunch today are a mosaic of history. Original New Haven brick mixed with bricks sent by people who understood that this wasn't just a restaurant. It was a living monument to American food history. The Lassen family reopened at 261 Crown Street. The 1898 broilers came with them. The 1929 toaster came with them. The recipe came with them. If you walk into Lewis's Lunch today, you're not just walking into a restaurant. You're walking into a time machine. The building is small, intimate. There's no fancy decor, no Instagram-worthy neon signs. Just wood-paneled walls, vintage photos, and the smell of beef cooking on century-old cast iron. You order at the counter. The menu is simple. The burger, potato salad, potato chips. That's it. The burgers are made fresh daily, hand-rolled from a proprietary blend of 5 cuts of beef. They're cooked to order on those original 1898 vertical broilers. The cheese, if you want it, is a sharp spread melted right on the broiler. The tomato and onion are optional. The bread is white toast, made in that 1929 toaster. And here's what shocks first-timers. There are no condiments. None. No ketchup. No mustard. No mayo. The Lassen family is adamant about this. They believe the burger speaks for itself. The quality of the meat, the char from the broiler, the simplicity of the toast. They don't want anything masking that flavor. Is it stubborn? Absolutely. Is it part of the charm? Without question. The restaurant is still family-owned, now in its 4th generation. Jeff Lassen, Lewis's great-grandson, carries on the tradition and the rules. The restaurant is closed on Sundays and Mondays. It's closed the week after New Year's. And it's closed for the entire month of August, what they call the counting of the spoons. Yes, really, the line can stretch out the door, especially at opening. But people wait. They wait because they know that what they're about to eat isn't just lunch. It's a piece of history. So did Lewis Lassen truly invent the hamburger? The honest answer is we'll probably never know for sure. The origins of the burger are lost in the fog of county fairs, lunch wagons, and immigrant ingenuity that defined turn-of-the-century America. But here's what I know for certain. In a world of endless choice, of impossible burgers and smash burgers and $50 Wagyu patties with truffle aioli, there is something profoundly beautiful about a place that refuses to change. A place that says, we did it this way in 1900, and we're doing it this way in 2026. Lewis's Lunch isn't perfect. It's cramped. It's opinionated. It won't give you ketchup no matter how nicely you ask. But it is real. It is honest. And it is the oldest continuously operating hamburger restaurant in the United States of America. Lewis Lassen came to this country as a 16-year-old immigrant with nothing but a strong back and a willingness to work. He pushed a butter cart through the streets of New Haven. He built a lunch wagon. He fed working people. And one day, in a moment of inspiration, he created something that would outlive him by centuries. That's the American dream served on toast. If you ever find yourself in New Haven, Connecticut, go to 261 Crown Street. Stand in line. Order a burger. Eat it the way it was eaten in 1900. And take a moment to appreciate the fact that you're tasting history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite burger spot? And do you think Lewis's Lunch deserves the title? Until next time.